Chapter 20. The season developed and matured. Another year's instalment of flowers, leaves, nightingales, thrushes, finches, and such ephemeral creatures took up their positions where only a year ago others had stood in their place, when these were nothing more than germs and inorganic particles. Rays from the sunrise drew forth the buds and stretched them into long stalks, lifted up sap in noiseless streams, opened petals, and sucked out secrets in invisible jets and breathings. Dairyman Crick's household of maids and men lived on comfortably, placidly, even merrily. Their position was perhaps the happiest of all positions in the social scale, being above the line at which neediness ends, and below the line at which the conveniences begin to cramp natural feeling, and the stress of threadbare modishness makes too little of enough. Thus passed the leafy time, when arborescence seems to be the only thing aimed at out of doors. Tess and Clare unconsciously studied each other, ever balanced on the edge of a passion, yet apparently keeping out of it. All the while they were converging under an irresistible law, as surely as two streams in one vale. Tess had never in her recent life been so happy as she was now, possibly never would be so happy again. She was, for one thing, physically and mentally suited among these new surroundings. The sapling, which had rooted down to a poisonous stratum on the spot of its sowing, had been transplanted to a deeper soil. Moreover, she, and Clare also, stood as yet on the debatable land between predilection and love, where no profundities have been reached, no reflections have set in, awkwardly inquiring, whither does this new current tend to carry me? What does it mean to my future? How does it stand towards my past? Tess was the merest stray phenomenon to Angel Clare as yet, a rosy, warming apparition which had only just acquired the attribute of persistence in his consciousness. So he allowed his mind to be occupied with her, deeming his preoccupation to be no more than a philosopher's regard of an exceeding novel, fresh, and interesting specimen of womankind. They met continually. They could not help it. They met daily in that strange and solemn interval, the twilight of the morning, in the violet or pink dawn, for it was necessary to rise early, so very early here. Milking was done betimes, and before the milking came the skimming, which began at a little past 3. It usually fell to the lot of some one or other of them to wake the rest, the first being aroused by an alarm clock, and, as Tess was the latest arrival, and they soon discovered that she could be depended upon not to sleep through the alarm as the others did, this task was thrust most frequently upon her. No sooner had the hour of 3 struck and whizzed than she left her room and ran to the dairyman's door, then up the ladder to Angel's, calling him in a loud whisper, then woke her fellow dairymaids. By the time that Tess was dressed, Clare was downstairs and out in the humid air. The remaining maids and the dairyman usually gave themselves another turn on the pillow, and did not appear until a quarter of an hour later. The grey half-tones of daybreak are not the grey half-tones of the day's close, though the degree of their shade may be the same. In the twilight of the morning, light seems active, darkness passive. In the twilight of evening, it is the darkness which is active and crescent, and the light which is the drowsy reverse. Being so often, possibly not always by chance, the first 2 persons to get up at the dairy house, they seemed to themselves the first persons up of all the world. In these early days of her residence here, Tess did not skim, but went out of doors at once after rising, where he was generally awaiting her. The spectral, half-compounded, aqueous light which pervaded the open mead impressed them with a feeling of isolation, as if they were Adam and Eve. At this dim, inceptive stage of the day, Tess seemed to Clare to exhibit a dignified largeness, both of disposition and physique, an almost regnant power, possibly because he knew that at that preternatural time hardly any woman so well endowed in person as she was likely to be walking in the open air within the boundaries of his horizon. Very few in all England. Fair women are usually asleep at midsummer dawns. She was close at hand, and the rest were nowhere.